actually, I just want to say a little bit about what's more important, I think, first of all, before you can do any work with anybody in terms of helping them to regulate themselves, is the kind of relationship you have will have a huge and direct impact on how successful you are in that. Yeah. So I think it's really important that your work, and forgive me if I'm teaching people something I already know, it's really important to make a good enough alliance. I'm a transactional analyst, psychotherapist, and we talk about the most important thing is to make an alliance, because once you've had that, once you've made that alliance, then of course it makes it easier for the person you're working with to trust that the things you're asking them to do are going to work.
So that's the most important thing, the first thing that's to be attended to. So that you make a strong enough alliance before you're asking people to do something that is kind of a bit out of the box, really. Because if someone is suffering from panic attacks or has had a continuous experience of being anxious, then it's not that easy for them to just stop doing that. So they have to be able to trust the person that they're working with that is going to work. Yeah, that makes sense. So you need to make that, we need as practitioners to make that relationship so people are going to be taken to places that they're not used to. They need that security of the relationship. And
sometimes it's important that you don't do that too soon. That you don't ask them to enter into doing something that's actually they're not ready to do yet. So by building up the relationship with them, they are then learning that it's okay for them to be with how they are in the state and in the states that they're in, and that there is ways and means of them being able to manage those states. Because inside their head, they have taken a bit of you and they hold it there, which gives them that support to be able to take some of those things on that you're suggesting that they do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and feels really important, because when I think about strategies or tools, it might be easy to think we can just lift them out the bag at any time, but actually you're saying that we need to be much more careful and mindful of how the person is.
Yeah, so that you don't invite somebody to do something that they're not ready to do yet. So you need to make an alliance with them, but also that you know where they're at in terms of their psychological ability, their awareness of themselves.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for laying that foundation, Steffi. That sounds really important. Yeah.
Well, in terms of top tips, I suppose one of the things that I'm really quite interested in is sometimes you already have a sense that when people get anxious, they go into their heads. Yeah, they go sort of a bit like frozen in the headlights. Yeah, and you can see them, when they sort of look like they're frozen in the headlights when they get anxious. And of course, what they're doing is getting the cortisol going, and they're, if you remember from my last talk about neuropsychology and the working with the brain, that when you release that cortisol, it stops the whole system.
Yeah.
So, and what it does is it kind of stops people from being able to work out what they need to do next. So I quite like using techniques that, there's a phone that's just...
You got something buzzing next to you.
Yeah, I've got Bob's phone in here.
Okay.
I quite like to use techniques that get people out of their head and into the here and now. Yeah? So they're no longer stuck in their head, in that frightened, in the headlights place. They are actually becoming more aware of themselves and what's going on around them, and they're more in the here and now place. So what happens when people access that anxiety place, they very often are accessing a place that belongs to history. Yeah, so it kind of like go little, and they don't know what to do to get out of it. So when you're inviting them back into the here and now by using a strategy, what you're inviting them to do is come back into the here and now and get out of their head. Yeah. So some of the techniques that you can use to enable them to do that need to be something sensory or something very strong smelling. Because obviously when you're popping something in your mouth, you're doing something behavioural. Right. And it's no longer a thinky thing, it's more of a doing thing. So I often say to people, carry with you a packet of strong mints, or even Fisherman's Friends, which I don't know whether you've tried a Fisherman's Friends.
I have, but just in case that doesn't travel internationally, can you say what it's like to have a Fisherman's Friend?
It rips your head off.
Right,
it's
okay.
so strong, you know. Yeah. It gives your mouth a sensation that is so strong. It stops you from thinking about the anxiety issue, and all you want to do is spit this thing out that's in your mouth.
Yes, so it's like a little sweetie, isn't it? But it's so strong that you wouldn't be able to continue stuck in the mind.
Absolutely. So it brings you into sensations, and it brings you into the here and now. I mean, they're used for people with sinus problems and with colds, or some people really like them. Would you believe it?
Yes, an acquired taste, perhaps. Yeah.
So you can use mints or Fisherman Friends. I actually had a client who would cut up a lemon into small slices, so that when she felt ungrounded or anxious, she'd suck the lemon. Yeah? And as we all know, when we're watching somebody sucking a lemon, we can already feel our taste buds.
I can feel it right there, just thinking about it.
Just now, yeah. Yes. So, and that's very powerful as well, because what we want to do when we suck a lemon is go and make that horrible sour face. And again, it's another way of getting somebody from that high anxiety state, or from that panic state straight into a more here and now experience. So they're the kind of things that are quite effective for people who have panic attacks, or who, are imagining something terrible is going to happen when they walk into a room. They can just suck that. Or people who get very anxious can have something to put into their mouths which is very oral, very behavioural, and quite grounding. Smells are quite good as well.
Okay.
And the kinds of smells that people might find useful are things that evoke something pleasant. Like, for example, when I was a child, my grandma used to use lavender. And I love that smell. And I always feel, very soothed and calmed when I smell it. Now, other people might have other smells that they like. And certainly sometimes in my therapy room, my clients ask me what my perfume is. And they go away and get a little sample. So it's a bit like a transitional object. It's something of me that they can spray on their wrist and smell, but also in the same time they're remembering in that moment that they can be calm, because they're reminded of what I might have said to them in that moment about what they need to do.
Yeah, so the smell can trigger some of the memories of your presence and of some of the helpful things that have been said in therapy. Yeah. Sounds so useful. Or like lavender can be on a pillow, or in a piece of fabric that's carried with us. Or Yeah. So they're kind of like the sort of instant, very useful tools that you can give somebody, strategies that you can give somebody to help them in their everyday life to stay more grounded. Yeah, they sound great for just switching the other systems on, because I guess with the cortisol everything closes down and it's just the brain's on fire.
So that's kind of like a quick way of soothing and getting more grounded and coming back into the here and now. So along with that, I usually